On this episode, I feel a little bit like a detective who has been given a big tip on a case. There is a 14-year-old listener of this show, Timeless with Julie Hartman, and my show with Dennis Prager, Dennis and Julie, who sent me the curriculum of his 9th grade ethnic studies course. He attends a public school here in California. In 2021, California became the first state in the union to require ethnic studies in high school in order for you to earn a diploma. I looked through the slides of the unit in this ethnic studies class that this young listener sent to me, and I have to tell you, I thought that it was going to be woke. I thought that it was going to be bad. I had no idea that it would be this rancid. We're going to look at it today like the true detectives we are, cracking the case of the woke infiltration of our public schools. I'm Julie Hartman, and this is Timeless. Hey everyone, welcome to Timeless. You know at the start of most Timelesses, I tell you to hit the subscribe button down below, to follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Julie R. Hartman. But today I want to throw another one in there, which is that you can email me at julie@julie-hartman.com. Given the entire basis of this episode, where a listener sent this curriculum to me, I now feel redoubled in my motivation to publicize my email at every chance that I get. That these tips that people have been sending to me have been amazing, including this one. So yes, today we are going back to high school, everyone, which is probably a traumatic experience to contemplate. No one wants to go back to high school. But actually, I think that many people may emerge from this episode feeling more grateful for their high school experience. I know when I read this syllabus and when I looked at some of the slides in this unit of this ethnic studies course that we're looking at today, I felt so grateful that I graduated from high school when I did. I graduated in 2018. Things were woke back then. That is certainly true. But things have so slid down here, have totally gone to bleep, that it makes my high school experience and the things that I was taught look totally great. And I'm sure that many of you will be feeling that too. So I want to start off, before we get into these slides of this ethnic studies course, I want to read to you what this individual, this listener, wrote to me. And I gave some indicators of this person's demographics, this person's identity, but I actually am not going to say his name. I'm not going to say the name of the public school, and I'm not going to say the name of the teacher, because he asked me specifically to really try to retain his anonymity, lest he be punished for sending me this curriculum. By the way, what a sign of the times that a student could get into trouble for just sending around the thing that he is being taught with our taxpayer money. You know, Dennis Prager, my co-host and dear friend, said recently on his fireside chat, there was someone who asked him, how do you know who's telling the truth? And he gave a really good answer, which is, if people are trying to conceal something or hide something, there's probably a pretty high chance that they're not telling the truth, that the thing that they are concealing is something that they know to be ashamed of because it is rooted in falsehoods. Same thing with this curriculum. If people are going to be upset at the student for exposing it, that should raise some questions for all of us. So 9th grader, 14 years old, California Public High School. I'm going to read to you just a snippet of what he wrote to me. He said that he wanted me to expose the quote-unquote baloney that he was learning in this class. Julie, if you want to show some of this on your show, please blur out my teacher's name or any other personal information about the school. I could get in trouble. The school doesn't want people sharing the curriculum with others, probably because they're afraid that people will reveal the truth about their agenda. This is an especially mature 9th grade student, I will just say. Kudos to this guy for having his head on straight. He also told me, among other things, about his high school experience, quote, "My homeroom has 2 giant trans flags. a giant pride flag hanging from the ceiling in the back of the classroom, and a flag on the wall that says pride in rainbow colors. So by my count, that means that there were 4 pride or pride adjacent flags in his homeroom. I wonder if there's an American flag in his homeroom. I would venture to say not. By the way, just as a total aside, what is the difference between trans flags and pride flags? Because he said 2 trans flags, a pride flag, and then another flag that said pride in rainbow colors. I thought the trans flag was the same thing as the pride flag. Whatever. I can't keep up. I'm sure I'm not the only one, however. So this course, as I've said many times, is ethnic studies. It was made mandatory in 2021 in the state of California, starting not that year. I think that formally every single public high school in California has to have an ethnic studies course by the 2025 school year. But there are a lot of schools which have gone ahead and implemented it already, including this boys' school. And so on today's episode, I'm going to look through just one of the units that this listener sent to me. He actually sent me a lot of other different PowerPoint slides, and it is just unbelievable the kind of stuff that they are teaching kids. But I'm just going to look at one of these units today. And if you like this episode and my exposing the rot, being a detective uncovering the buried tips, the buried facts of the case, then I'll do subsequent episodes where I'll look at other units of this class. Just to give you a little teaser of how absurd and woke it is. The units include systems, that's the name of one of the units, social movements, solidarity is a unit in the class. There are slides within these different units that I saw, again, just to give you a teaser, that pertain to land acknowledgement exercises. Apparently in this course, the teacher is spending a significant amount of time having her students go through and acknowledge what land they are on at this high school, and to do other exercises of places that they've been where they are on land that was previously inhabited by a Native American tribe. By the way, I'm sure this teacher, like many other teachers, doesn't care that the Native American tribe, before they were conquered by Europeans, probably in all likelihood conquered other Native American tribes. But we'll just put that aside. There was another slide, too, that I'll just tease that had to do with history. And it was kind of like a synopsis of the ethnic history of the United States. And it was just one after the other of all of these different groups in the United States who have been oppressed or misplaced, et cetera, et cetera. And just a quick note before we dive in on this, because I want to make something clear, that as woke and absurd as this ethnic studies course is, I want people to know that I am not just having a Pavlovian, knee-jerk bad reaction to this. I actually think that there are some parts of this curriculum which are fine, which are good, should be taught. And, on this slide that I just said about history, where it's just a litany of all these different groups who've been oppressed in the United States, there are groups who have been oppressed in the United States. There were people who were pushed off of their land. Japanese were interned in this country. Chinese Americans were barred from immigrating here. Black people were enslaved, were subject to Jim Crow laws. I just want to say at the outset, I get that. I am not saying, and frankly, I don't know any other conservative who is saying that that should not be taught in schools. Of course it should be. But the thing that I take issue with is that that is seen as the whole story of ethnic history in the United States. And at least from what I can tell from the units that this public high school student sent me, is that this course is not acknowledging all the good that the United States has done to try to rectify the wrongs of the past. All of the ways that we are an incredibly diverse, multi-ethnic society. What it is about the United States that makes it such a country where we have the most diverse population in the history of the world. We need to supplement the good with the bad. The story of the United States is not all bad. We need to talk about things like e pluribus unum, our national credo. It means out of many one, out of many different races, ethnicities, nationalities, religions, genders. We are all one American people. Where the heck is the talk about e pluribus unum in this class? That is the issue that I take with it. Not that we should never acknowledge the wrong that the United States has done, but we ought to also acknowledge all the good that it has done too. With that being said, let's go in to some of these slides, okay? There were a lot of slides. I just took the highlights for you, and get ready for it. Let's start with slide 1, which was in the curriculum, the unit here. I just wanted to highlight it for you. There's a section where the teacher is encouraging the class to tell her any triggers that they have. And she defines triggers as topics or things that might make you shut down if you don't expect them. General things that might make you shut down, okay, isn't that what you just said? Or anything else that you would like me to know right away. And the teacher was kind enough to acknowledge her own triggers that the students need to be aware of, lest they bring up something that makes her shut down. And we see here on the slide, I'm by the way, it's great if you watch the show. The show is also conducive to people who only listen, hence why I'm reading aloud these slides. She gave her trigger, and it says that she doesn't like talking about COVID deaths. So don't ever bring that up to your teacher. Don't ever acknowledge that anybody died of COVID. I mean, look, we could do a whole show on this. I'm stating the obvious, but it is such a profound misuse of time. It is so morally confused to do this to students. Everyday life is a trigger. You are constantly triggered all of the time, okay? I have a friend whose mother died, and he told me that every time, every single day, he walks down the street and he sees a mother holding a baby, a mother with her child, he is reminded of the fact that his mother is dead. That is life. I could give a million more examples. You are harming students by trying to create this perfect world, not to mention that it is absurd. Anyway, just thought I would throw that out for you, that this is what's happening. You can list your triggers in the class. Now let's go on to the syllabus of this ethnic studies course and how they define ethnic studies and talk about why it is a good thing. This is slide 15. Just indicating for my producers. Welcome to Ethnic Studies, this reads. The purpose of this course is to educate students to be politically, socially, and economically conscious about their personal connections to local and national history, okay? We'll focus on social justice, social responsibility, and social change. And then at the end, just to synopsize, I won't read the whole thing, this course will focus on the experiences of African American, Asian, Pacific Islander, Desi Americans, Chicanx, I don't know if I said that right, / Latinx, and American Indians. Students will be encouraged to consider concepts related to their own personal group and or identity. Okay, so we just see that this is just like a hodgepodge. I mean, do you read that and really understand what the course is about? There's nothing concrete in there. It's just this academic jargon. The amount of words we should count in that syllabus, and by the way, in any syllabus, the amount of words that end in ly or isms, just this academic jargon that is thrown at these students. It's like, give me a list of the different topics that we're going to cover, the specific things that I am going to learn. They would say you're going to learn about intersectionality, but that is a big concept that frankly means nothing. It is just a bottomless pit of sludge. And students are going to walk away from the class not being armed with particular facts, just kind of knowing about all of these pie in the sky concepts. It's just, oh God, again, it's just such a bad thing to be teaching students. But what I want to highlight in that syllabus, in addition to the nonsensical, vague academic jargon, is that it really comes out with saying that the course is about your experience. It's about students considering their own identities and to be politically engaged. And we're going to see as we go through more of the slides, the way that this course is not just trying to inform students about certain woke diktats, but it's trying to like really integrate these woke ideas into a student's identity. I mean, when you go to school, it used to be understood that school had a particular role in your life and was supposed to teach you certain things. And then outside of that, there were other people who fulfilled other roles and other places that you went to develop other parts of your personality. Again, it used to be understood that you'd go to school to learn like specific things, to learn hard subjects, to learn how to read, to learn how to do algebra, to learn biology. But now in this blurred lines, confused world that we live in, schools are not just a place for you to learn academic subjects, but they're places where your whole identity can be shaped and your social consciousness and your, sense of wanting to go out in the world and make change. I just think that should be something that you should develop outside of school. School has its purpose. Going to your sports league has a purpose. Going to your music class has a purpose. Let's keep these boundaries. Your parents certainly have a purpose in the things that they teach you. But now again, it's the school is the parent and the school is the life advice giver. And it's just gotten too much. Slide 14. Just want to highlight a word for you. Another academic jargony word that ends in Y. Positionality. This is the intro to the ethnic studies course, and the slide says, how does the field of ethnic studies help students understand their identities and their positionality in the communities and society that they inhabit? Sean, I'd like to ask you to do me a favor. Could you look up the word positionality right now? I don't think that's a word. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'll pay you $5 if I'm wrong. I don't think that is a word. It could be now a word because the academics have made it a word. But what the hell does that mean? Positionality? I know what they're trying to get at. He's shaking his head. It's not a word. It's not a word. How does this speak for the state of American public education when teachers are using in slides things that are not even real words? Thank you. No Merriam-Webster. If it's not on Merriam-Webster, it's not a word, at least by my count. But I know what they mean by this, even though I would like to come out and acknowledge that it is not an actual word. What they mean by this is that they want students to understand, like, their oppression. They want students to have a sense of consciousness if they are LGBTQ or if they are a racial minority, where they are positioned, where they stand in the rank of others in society. And it's just this sludge. It's just this trying to make students aware of these supposed constructs, these supposed things that are working against them that really, by and large, don't exist. But again, I just want to point out that this course is unabashedly admitting that this is not about educating or informing students. It's about shaping students' identity and senses of themselves. And I think that is a line, again, that has been blurred and should not be blurred. Also, I want to acknowledge, too, that this course, from my reading of it, says or considers race to be a social construct. I want to just say that at the outset because we're about to see a lot of slides that have to do with race. And so we need to understand how the teacher and how the course seems to consider race to inform our evaluation of how they're talking about it. There is a slide in another curriculum that this person sent to me of this class, which says that race is a social construct, okay? When people say that, when they call race or gender a social construct, what they mean, if I can get into their heads and synopsize it for you, is that it is something that has been constructed by society to define people or to divide people. Reading from the internet, a social construct is any category or thing that is made real by convention or collective agreement. So the argument goes, and it's so like nonsensical that I even don't even know if I can effectively convey it to you. But the argument goes that race and gender are not real realities. They were things that were invented by people, again, to divide or to pigeonhole individuals in a population. Okay. But this is important to know. That's how they view. They view race as a social construct, something that is made up. Okay. Then let's continue. This is the identity section of this ethnic studies course. They ask a lot of questions in these slides, asking students to consider parts of their identity. And some of these questions include, what is my identity and how is it shaped by internal and external factors? Okay, so let's figure out what they mean by internal and external factors. Internal factors, they define as aspects of identity that are determined entirely by you. Some examples that this teacher gives are style, dress, and interests. And then external factors are aspects of identity determined by the outside world or by society, how other people see you. And the examples that the teacher gives are race and gender, okay? So trying to form that understanding of identity, there are internal and external factors. Okay, fair enough. That seems kosher to me so far. Then there was this exercise that the teacher encouraged students to partake in, where they would draw these bubbles surrounding their name. They'd put their name in the center of the paper and they'd have these bubbles surrounding it. And they would have to write a few things that they thought made up their identity that both fall into this internal factors category and this external factors category. The internal factors, the way you view yourself, and the external factors, the way that other people may view you. And the teacher did this exercise herself to give an example to the class. Let's look now at the way that the teacher defined her identity. This is slide 2. So we see that she is there in the center, and all around there are these different characteristics. One of them is caring, fair enough. Again, I'm not saying all of this is terrible. I'm happy that the teacher is putting a good character trait as something that she views as her identity. One of them is educator. Okay, she's an educator. But then we see that there's mixed race, Asian or Asian American, radical, she says, is a part of her identity, and loud. But here's what's important to note, and if you're looking at this slide, please look even closer. The mixed race identity bubble, the radical identity bubble, and the loud identity bubble are with the red arrows, meaning that the teacher labels these as external factors, i.e. things that other people assign to her that make up her identity. It's really interesting because, okay, obviously if this teacher is mixed race, people may look at her and they see that she's mixed race. I get that. But loud and radical, it seems to me, honestly, from my experience of knowing a lot of people who participate in these quote unquote identity exercises, is that may be the teacher's perception of how she thinks other people see her. And that is different than how other people actually see her. So what I would like to ask this teacher is, have you been called radical? Have you been called loud? Maybe she has. Maybe she has by one person. But again, I have seen this so many times where there are these assumptions where it's like, well, because I'm mixed race or because I'm left wing, people think this of me. People have these assumptions about me. And it's kind of amazing because on the one hand, as we'll see in this course, this teacher and other educators decry the fact that there are people who make assumptions, who have stereotypes about others. But then they are perpetuating and glorifying and participating in these stereotypes by literally in exercises like that, assigning them to themselves. It's like this weird dual thing. If you don't like the existence of this, why are you drawing attention to it? So that's the identity part. And there are these questions too that go along with this slide where students are asked these to identify what parts of their identity they choose for themselves. Another question is, what parts of your identity do you feel are determined by others, by society, or by chance? What aspects of your identity do you keep private in order to be accepted? What aspects of your identity are you willing to change to fit in? By the way, what if the answer is nothing to those questions? What if a student doesn't feel that there are parts of his or her identity that they have to keep private in order to be accepted? What if a student doesn't feel the need to change their identity to fit in? I use a lot of MyPillow products, including the My Slippers, the MyPillow kitchen towel sets, and a lot more. And you can get many of these products at a discount if you use the promo code Hartman, which is my last name spelled Hartman. For a limited time, you'll receive 60% off of the Giza Dream Sheets that comes with a 60-day money-back guarantee and a 10-year warranty. You'll get a set for as low as $39.99. And for a limited time, with any purchase, you'll get Mike Lindell's soft cover book free with the promo code Hartman. Just go to mypillow.com and click on the radio listener square and use the promo code Hartman. Along with this offer, you will get deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including the MyPillow mattress topper, the aforementioned MyPillow towel sets, and more. Call 1-800-566-6745 and use the promo code Hartman. Or again, go to mypillow.com and use the promo code Hartman. The existence of these questions, and I can really say this as someone who's been in school and who's had to fill out these worksheets, and they make you think that these problems exist. By asking these questions, by really hammering it home, you read those questions as a student and you go, I never thought about that, but if the teacher's asking me that what parts of my identity I have to change to fit in, maybe I do have parts of my identity that I change to fit in. Then you start to overthink and overthink and overthink, and then it becomes like a part of your worldview. And by the way, that's exactly what they want. They want people to have this heightened awareness of their aspects of their identity. They're, downplaying, their sexuality or whatever to fit in. But why would you create these problems? Why would you froth up this confusion if it doesn't exist in students? Just seems like you're setting them up to fail. And also what I don't like about this exercise and really about this whole class in general. By the way, if this class were ethnic studies and it were truly about the way that different ethnicities have fared in the United States, which some parts of this course are about, fine. But this part of the class, which is teaching students to have this heightened awareness of their own ethnicity and others' ethnicity and how that fits into their identity, what I don't like about that is that it reduces your identity to these immutable characteristics, to these things like your race that you can't control. Of course, your race is a part of your identity, or your sexuality is a part of your identity, but there's so much more to your identity that matters far, far more than those immutable characteristics. Your identity is not your race or your sexuality or the way or the stereotypes that other people have of you. Your identity is who you are, your character, your values, your worldview. That is really what makes you you. And these courses make students think that, again, these external labels are the things that make them them. It's absurd. I'll give you just an anecdote from my own life. My best friend in the world, literally in the entire world, is a person who on paper could not be more different than I am. He's a guy, I'm a girl. Okay, we have that difference. He is brown. He is South Asian. I am white. He is Muslim. I am Christian. He is the son of immigrants. I am not the son of immigrants. He grew up in a low-income household. I did not grow up in a low-income household. We have all of these differences: socioeconomic, religious, gender, racial, etc. And you know what? It doesn't matter one damn bit in our friendship. Sometimes we make jokes, he'll like call me the white girl if I go to Starbucks, and we'll make jokes about it to each other, but it plays no role in our friendship. This is someone who I talk to every single day for like 2 hours a day. He's my best friend. You know why it plays no role in our friendship? Because we're friends. We have our own identities that exist outside of these external labels. We share values. We share worldviews. We share interests. That is what brings us together. That is what makes him my friend. It's not that he's brown. It's not that he's Muslim. It's that he's him. He's a great person. And we are just so teaching kids the wrong things to view that in themselves and in each other as the be-all, end-all. So now let's look at stereotypes, the section of this syllabus. Let's go to slide 3, where they define what a stereotype is. A stereotype is an assumption about an individual based on group membership information, not individual characteristics. Okay, I don't have a problem with that. Seems like a pretty accurate definition of a stereotype. Other forms, stereotypical, stereotyped. You know what that reminds me of? It reminds me of like pronouns. They, them, theirs, we have to, it's like pronouns for the word stereotype. We have to acknowledge all the versions of the word stereotype to fully make stereotype as a word feel included in this syllabus. Dear God. Example of a stereotype. When people use stereotypes to make assumptions about others, it can cause harm that isn't noticeable right away. How is that an example of a stereotype? Oh, I guess it's an example of how the word stereotypes is used in a sentence. Okay. Let's go on to the next slide on this stereotype section. It is the basics of stereotypes. And we see that stereotypes, quote, are used to justify violence and hatred against certain groups, especially people of color. Okay. Then let's go on to slide 4. Where they have this kind of chart, if you will, of what happens when you exercise stereotypes. And it says stereotype, arrow, prejudice, arrow, discrimination. Okay? We could do a whole show on stereotypes, which is a very uncomfortable subject. Obviously, there are some stereotypes which are not true. There are some stereotypes which have been harmful. There are some stereotypes which have been used to oppress people. Whenever we have these discussions, you have to go through like a litany of acknowledgments. I acknowledge all of that, okay? But also, I'm sorry, some stereotypes don't come from nowhere. And the existence of a stereotype isn't always a bad thing. It definitely can be a bad thing, but it isn't always. Like, for instance, there's a stereotype that Irish people are loud. I'm half Irish. I can tell you, we are incredibly loud. There's a stereotype that Irish people like to drink. I'll tell you, we like to drink. And so there's just, what I'm trying to point out here is that there doesn't seem to be a lot of nuance in these discussions. There could be a really fruitful, interesting discussion about stereotypes if you should ever acknowledge them, if you should try to change them, if they have any validity. But here you see on these slides, stereotypes are used to justify violence against people of color. And stereotypes goes to prejudice, which goes to discrimination. It's just, again, everything is in this worldview of racism, sexism, homophobia. The United States is so terrible. Here are all the constructs which have led to all of these bad things. It's just like, please give it a rest. Okay. But there are parts of this stereotypes discussion. As I said, I'm not totally against everything in this course. There are parts of it which are true and which are valid. There's a part of this curriculum where the teacher gives examples of people in the United States who have been discriminated based on stereotypes. She gives an example of Maya Angelou. She gives an example of Japanese Americans who were put in internment camps. And she gives another example of this individual named Pietro. I'm going to show what the teacher says about him in slides 9 and 10. Pietro was an Italian American who lived in Little Italy, the section of New Orleans. And in the 1890s, apparently a police chief was killed in New Orleans. And people thought that the police chief must have been killed by the Italian mafia. And so what happened allegedly is that there were all of these anti-Italian riots, and there were these people who went in and lynched several Italian Americans, including this man named Pietro, who the teacher is highlighting. And so, okay, again, I don't have an issue with that. That is, if that story is true, and I have every reason to believe that it is true, then it is true that there was a stereotype of Italians committing crime, and people in New Orleans succumbed to that stereotype and used it to go out and lynch people who are Italian Americans. Okay. I mean, again, that's something that should be taught. But the problem is that is the whole story. That is what seems to be the whole story based on my looking of these slides. And again, the follow-up questions that accompany these discussions are really interesting. What stories from history that you've learned from class, your family, books you've read, seem to connect to this story? Again, what if a student doesn't have a story that connects to this story? This is a story about an Italian being lynched 130 years ago in the United States. What if that story doesn't connect to something that the student has read or something from the student's own family? Isn't that okay? And look, maybe to give the teacher the benefit of the doubt, to give the class the benefit of the doubt, the student could say, yeah, I have no connection. But just the insistence on all of these questions, connect this lynching and this stereotype to your own life, it keeps the idea of stereotypes alive. That's the irony. If you hate stereotypes and you think that they have had outsized influence, don't give them so much power. At least that's my 2 cents. And then let's go back to slide 2. This is where the teacher did that exercise of identity with all of the different bubbles. We have it right here, slide 2. Okay, so given this discussion of stereotypes, look again at this slide. This is how she perceives how others think of her. Okay, radical, loud, mixed race. Isn't she in this identity exercise kind of like succumbing to stereotypes which she just decried as being harmful, right? Like she's saying, oh, people think of me as radical and loud, presumably because she's mixed race. Well, you're fulfilling the prophecy. Like you're succumbing to the stereotype, and by saying that you think other people have this stereotype against you. It's just kind of this self-destruction I see. Let's look at slide 6 on this whole stereotype syllabus thing. This is called street calculus, okay? This is one of the parts of this course, and students have to look at this political cartoon and then answer some questions about it. And it shows these 2 people walking past each other on the street, and one of them is apparently a black guy and one of them is apparently a white guy. And it shows what the other person is allegedly what the person is allegedly thinking about the other. So the white guy walking next to the black guy sees the black guy, and apparently he's thinking, okay, he's black, check. We see this here in the risk factors part. He's male, check. He has a baseball cap, check. He has loafers, check. He's carrying a FedEx envelope shirt, check. And then there are all these other boxes: aggressive, short hair, baggy jacket, wrong neighborhood. And it's just showing what this white guy apparently is thinking of this black guy amidst all the other things that he could think of this black guy. And he's calculating the risk of the black guy. And the black guy is in turn doing it to the white guy, where there are all of these categories about race, about gender, about the look of the person, about the dress of the person. And the black guy is checking these boxes: white, male, wrong neighborhood, humming, carrying groceries. And he's calculating the risk factor of the white guy that he's walking next to, okay? This is just, I'm sorry, this is not the way that people tend to think, at least in my view. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe some people do think this way. But when you're walking near someone on the street, when you pass someone on the street, it is undoubtedly true that you do a bit of a scan with people who you walk by. You try to get a little download on the situation, especially in today's world where crime is so high, to see, okay, is this person walking past me someone who's safe? Is the person walking past me going to pickpocket me? Is the person walking past me going to take out a knife and stab me? Every single person, male, female, black, white, young, old, transgender, cisgender, every single person does that. But the thing about that political cartoon is that it makes it, again, and this is the whole point, it makes your mentality seem so obsessed with like race and income, and I just don't think that's the way that people perceive one another anymore. When you're walking past someone on the street, what you're really looking for is, are they creepy? Do they look like they could hurt me? And that doesn't have anything to do with race. That doesn't have anything to do with their sexuality. It has to do with the vibe that that person is giving off, okay? I was in a store, I was in CVS yesterday, late at night, getting toothpaste, and there was a woman in the CVS, a white woman, so she wasn't, she didn't fit any of the supposed stereotypes of who I would see as someone who would harm me. She was a white woman, and she had all of these face tattoos, and she stunk, and she was kind of walking around like she was drugged out, and she seemed creepy, and she seemed volatile. And the reason why I was afraid of her was because she seemed creepy and volatile. It had nothing to do with her race. It had nothing to do with her gender, nothing to do with anything. And so, again, the point that if there's any point I want to hammer home this episode, is that these curriculi, maybe is the plural of the word, are putting these stereotypes in people's heads. If you want to eliminate the stereotype, don't offer it for the student's consideration at every single turn. It's just frothing up these problems that we all claim we don't want to exist, but by continuing to over and over and over say, oh, everyone walks around looking for stereotypes and everyone is, it makes matters worse. And there's another slide 16, where they say, what can your generation do to fight against stereotypes? Maybe there aren't many stereotypes that our generation has to fight against. Maybe the prejudice and the discrimination that historically came from stereotypes has been mitigated and doesn't exist to the same extent anymore. Could we consider that as a possibility? Okay, final two portions. And again, if you like this, if you want to see more of this, there's a lot more material that this individual sent to me. This part of the curriculum is called the Universe of Obligation. Okay. It's an exercise. Universe of obligation. Let's look at slide 11. So apparently there exists a universe of obligation, and this is on an individual level, and this is on a societal level. Okay, you have people who you are obligated to. Point taken. Here we have this chart of these concentric circles, and in the center is USA. And the point of the exercise is for students to write in these circles and rank the people who they think the United States has the greatest obligation to. So the closer you are to the middle of the circle, those are the people who you think the United States has the greatest obligation to, and then the further you get away, it gets less and less in the United States' alleged obligation to those groups. Let's look at the categories of groups that the teacher offered for students to put in those concentric circles. This is slide 12. Okay. We see men, women, white men, black women, indigenous people, wealthy people, low-income families, and LGBTQ. So we know how this goes, right? We know that white people or white women, white men, whatever the category was, are going to be put up really close because the United States allegedly views itself as having more of an obligation to white people, and then all of the minority groups are going to be on the outside. You know how that is how that exercise is going to go. Maybe I'm wrong, but I doubt that I am wrong. What's fascinating is that there wasn't another category of people, which is immigrants. That actually would be a really interesting discussion. And it's something that I wonder a lot myself. I think that the United States, first and foremost, has the highest obligation to its citizens. But what if there are people coming here fleeing persecution? To what extent do we have an obligation to those individuals? My point in bringing that up is that could be a really fruitful, interesting discussion. That really does have to do with themes of obligation and a country's sense of responsibility to others. But they're just making this all about group identity. And of course, in the past, the United States has been better to white people than to non-white people, have been better to some groups over others. But do you know what we have achieved? We are now in such a remarkable state where people are most of the time treated equally in this country, where the United States does fulfill its obligations, again, most of the time, to people regardless of their groups, okay? I mean, if you look at other countries, let's talk about women, obligations to women. There are other countries where you will not be able to get an education if you are a woman. You will not have the same civil liberties and protections if you are a woman. There are other countries, such as half of Africa's 54 countries, where if you are gay, you are thrown in prison. And in some of those countries, if you are gay, you are executed. You are punished with the death penalty, okay? Those are countries that do not fulfill their obligations to all constituents, all members of their population. Those are countries where the leaders exercise certain obligations to some and discard certain obligations with others. But that is not largely true of the United States of America, and we need to acknowledge that. And when teachers are doing an exercise like this, they are making students think that LGBTQ people, for instance, are so egregiously not being taken care of in the United States compared to white people. Okay, that by and large is not true. The evidence does not bear that out. And as unpopular as that is to say, I don't care, I'm saying it. And then finally, intersectionality, okay? So we have the universe of obligation, we have the stereotypes discussion, the identity discussion, it's all identity politics stuff. Now let's look to the crescendo, the intersectionality argument. Slide 18, how they define intersectionality. Another word ending in Y, academic jargon. The idea that we all have multiple identities like gender, race, and sexuality that make us who we are. And the intersection of these identities come together to create unique forms of privileges and challenges. They were equitable with the word intersectionality, just like the pronouns. They acknowledge the other forms, intersectional and intersectionalities, okay? Now let's go to slide 17. They gave an example of an intersectionality chart for Beyonce. Woman, black, cisgender, rich, heterosexual, and non-disabled, okay? This is how people in American public schools view identity. Need I say more? Really? That's who Beyonce is? Just those characteristics? What makes Beyonce Beyonce is that she's badass. She's an amazing singer. She's an amazing dancer. She has a great family life. She seems like a great person. That's what people, when they look at Beyonce, that's what they think of. That's what they love. That's what makes her her. The fact that she's a black woman, cisgender, heterosexual, people don't think about that. They really don't. It's so unbelievable. This is what they're inculcating into kids, that this is who Beyonce is. So the whole idea is that these identities intersect and make her who she is, and we can see that the ones in red pose challenges to her, a woman in black, and then the ones that are in blue don't pose challenges to her, rich, cisgender, heterosexual, and non-disabled. What does a chart like that teach you? A chart like that teaches you that if you have certain characteristics, like you're rich, then literally by definition, that is a privilege. That is not a challenge. And obviously having money is a privilege, but that doesn't mean that people who are rich don't face challenges. Being heterosexual is convenient, but that doesn't mean that people who are heterosexual don't have hardship in their lives. But when literally in schools, they're just segregating. If you're this, that means that you have challenges. If you're this, it means that you are privileged. They make the experience of life so black and white. And so we shouldn't be shocked when we see something like the Israel massacre happened and people are just immediately siding with Hamas. They are immediately siding against the victims of the terror, the 1,400 Israelis who were killed on October 7th. They are not siding with those people because of this whole idea of intersectionality. Well, Israelis are privileged. Many of them are white. They are Western. They are Jewish, which apparently in this intersectional world is seen as a privilege. So when they had terrorism committed against them, that is why we see petitions like the Harvard petition say that they are held entirely responsible for their terror. It's this intersectional idea of you don't judge people's oppression based on the acts against them or objectively of what they're gone through. You judge people's oppression or people's privilege by the immutable characteristics that they possess. That is a rancid, sick way of thinking about the world. And finally, just to give you even more hope that the state of American education is alive and well, here's one of the exercises done in this intersectional part of this class. It's called a family map. This is slide 19. And students get to create their own intersectional map for their families. You place your name at the top. You draw a family map with 3 generations. You circle members of the family who identify as female. You put squares for males, triangles for non-binary members of your family. Add their name, their birthplace, their ethnic racial identity, parentheses, the aspect of who you are that is related to your ethnicity, race, and cultural background, okay? So that's how you view your family, as triangles and squares and birthdays and their race and how they identify and who they sleep with, and nothing to do with the actual content of the character and values of the person, okay? That is essentially what is being taught. Now, a teacher would cut in and go, no, of course, I think that the values matter, but that is not being reflected in this syllabus. We need more episodes like this. We need more people sending around these curriculi, if that is the proper word, so that we can expose it. Thank you to this student for doing so. Thank you all for listening. And again, if you like this, let me know, and I will do subsequent episodes further cracking the case. Hopefully we can rectify it before it's too late. See you all soon. Take care.